Let me talk to the woman who's hurting but pretending she's fine. The one holding it together at work, smiling at dinner, crying in secret. This story, it's yours. It's about losing everything and then finding yourself. You need to hear this because it's not just inspiring, it's real, raw, and maybe, just maybe, it'll remind you that your comeback hasn't even started yet. So stay with me, because the most powerful twist is waiting at the end. Now let's begin the story. The moment the photo hit social media, everything shattered. It wasn't just any photo. It was the photo. Him, laughing, her, clinging to his arm like she owned him. The caption, "Weekend getaway with my queen." It was posted at 11:03 a.m. on a quiet Sunday. By 11:07, the comments were flooding in. Wait, isn't he married? Where's the wife? Bold of him to post this when his pregnant wife is due next month. And just like that, the internet exploded. Screenshots of the post spread like wildfire. Instagram stories, TikTok stitches, Facebook threads. It was everywhere. But the most brutal response came not from strangers online. It came from the one person who had every right to burn it all down. At 11:48 a.m., just 45 minutes after he made his grand romantic post with the woman he wasn't married to, she responded. One photo. A glittering diamond ring. Her hand entwined with another man's. Taller, leaner, sharper jawline. The caption, just 2 words, engaged billionaire. And the internet lost its collective mind. It wasn't just a revenge post, it was a declaration, a middle finger to betrayal, a plot twist no one saw coming. The mistress went quiet, the husband silent, but everyone else, oh, they had opinions. She upgraded hard, from a cheater to a billionaire. Sis said, watch this. Netflix, are you seeing this? I need a series. But this didn't start with a photo. It started with a lie, a betrayal. A woman named Emily Reid, and a man who thought she'd always stay quiet. This is her story. And it begins not with glamour, but with heartbreak. Emily Reid was 29, 5 months pregnant, and had just reached the part of her pregnancy where bending over was a struggle. She was used to discomfort, morning sickness, backaches, sleepless nights. But nothing could prepare her for the ache that came from being erased. She wasn't always a woman who made headlines. She didn't crave attention or spotlight. She was a teacher, 5th grade, loved by her students, known for her calm demeanor, her cozy sweaters, and her weird obsession with those little desk plants that never seemed to survive longer than a week. She was warm, grounded, and had a smile that could silence a room full of chaotic 10-year-olds. She lived in a quiet suburb outside of Dallas with her husband Mason Reid, a mid-level tech executive with a great LinkedIn photo and a habit of over-promising and under-delivering. He wore expensive watches but forgot anniversaries, drove a Tesla but couldn't remember to pick up milk. Their marriage, it wasn't perfect, but Emily tried. She made excuses for the missed calls, the business trips, the nights he came home smelling like cologne that wasn't hers. She told herself it was just stress, work, the baby, anything but the truth. But the truth always finds its way in. It came to her the night before the Instagram bomb. She was scrolling through Mason's iPad, something she rarely did, looking for a recipe he'd saved. Instead, she found an open tab, Instagram. And there they were, photos, messages, voice notes. Her, the other woman, pouting into the camera, whispering sweet nothings, telling him she couldn't wait for their weekend escape. Emily didn't cry. She stared at the screen for a long time, her hand on her belly, her pulse silent with shock. She clicked through every message, every comment, every like. And then, quietly, she put the iPad down and walked to the bedroom. Mason wasn't home. He was on a late-night meeting. Of course he was. She didn't sleep that night, but she made a plan. The next morning, while the world was still sipping coffee, Mason hit post on the picture that would change everything. The mistress, smug and radiant, kissing his cheek. The caption about love, the lie. Emily saw it before most people. She stared at it for a full minute, her lips tight, her expression unreadable. And then she opened her phone, scrolled to her photo library, found the picture she'd taken 3 nights earlier. The hand, the ring, the man. Not just any man. Julian Carr. You know the name. Founder of car tech, billionaire by 28, the man who once made headlines for buying an island and turning it into a sanctuary for endangered sea turtles. He was rarely photographed, barely gave interviews, and never showed off his relationships. But there he was, hand in hand with Emily. No face, just the hands, the diamond, the unmistakable Cartech tattoo on his wrist. It was intentional, calculated, and devastatingly effective, because everyone knew who he was, and no one saw it coming. Emily hadn't just responded, she detonated. And it wasn't fake. It wasn't a stunt, because while Mason was out chasing attention, Emily had been rebuilding quietly, fiercely. And Julian, he wasn't a rebound. He was a chapter that had started long before Mason's betrayal. A friend, a protector, someone who saw her worth before it became convenient to do so. But that's a story for later, because right now, all anyone could talk about was the two posts, side by side. Like a digital duel. Him, weekend getaway with my queen, engaged, billionaire. 2 clicks, 2 captions, and a war ignited. Within 2 hours, Mason deleted his post, but it was too late. The screenshots had already made their way to TikTok, where creators were turning the drama into sagas. By sundown, Emily's name was trending. But this was just the beginning, because Emily Reid was done hiding, and the next time the world saw her, it wouldn't just be as the woman who clapped back. It would be as the woman who rewrote the whole damn narrative. To the world, Emily Reid had always been the sweet, soft-spoken wife. The kind of woman who brought homemade muffins to PTA meetings and remembered her in-laws' birthdays even when her husband didn't. She was the one who organized baby showers for coworkers, sent thank-you cards by hand, and still smiled when people talked over her. On paper, she was the wife. The calm one. The quiet one. But what they didn't know, what Mason never bothered to ask, was that Emily Reid was so much more than what met the eye. Born in a modest town outside of Austin, Texas, Emily was the second of 3 children. Her parents were school teachers, hardworking and principled, the kind of people who believed in saving every receipt and saying grace before dinner. They raised Emily to value kindness, but never at the cost of self-respect. Her mother used to say, "You don't have to be loud to be strong." And for years, Emily lived by that. In school, she was the kid who never needed the spotlight. She thrived quietly, honor roll every year, editor of the school paper, track team captain. While other girls daydreamed about prom dresses and social media clout, Emily was planning her future. She wanted to teach, to write, to make a difference. And she did. She graduated top of her class, earned a full scholarship to the University of Texas, and pursued a degree in elementary education. It was at a conference for young educators that she first met Mason. He was magnetic, the type who made every woman in the room lean in a little closer when he spoke. Emily wasn't immune. He was charming, ambitious, and had this way of making you feel like the only person in the room. They hit it off fast. Too fast, in hindsight. But at the time, it felt like fate. Mason swept her into his world of startup buzzwords and late-night business calls. He talked big, always about the next investment, the next breakthrough. Emily was proud of him. She believed in his vision. When he proposed, she said yes without hesitation. She thought they were building something solid, a life, a future. And for a while, they were happy. They bought a little house in the suburbs. Emily decorated it with handmade curtains and family photos. Mason commuted to the city while Emily taught at the local elementary school. On weekends, they'd garden together or binge-watch documentaries about space and science. She thought they were a team, but over time the cracks began to show. At first it was small things. He stopped asking about her day, stopped joining her for dinner. He was glued to his phone during movie nights, texting clients at 11 p.m. He forgot her birthday once, then twice. She forgave. She adjusted. She made excuses for him. To her friends, to her family, to herself. Then came the lies. Business trips that didn't line up. Sudden expenses on credit cards she didn't recognize. A lipstick stain on a shirt collar. When she asked, he gaslit her. "You're being paranoid," he'd snap. "Don't make everything about you." And just like that, Emily stopped asking. She retreated into herself, into silence. By the time she got pregnant, she was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. Still, she hoped the baby would bring them closer, that he'd change, that he'd show up. But Mason didn't show up. Not emotionally, not physically, not even at the doctor's appointments. The first time she heard their baby's heartbeat, she held the monitor to her belly alone, tears slipping down her cheeks in the dim exam room. That was the moment she realized she had to save herself. What Mason didn't know was that while he was pulling away, Someone else had already noticed her. Someone who saw more than the patient's smile and the tired eyes. Someone who had known her long before Mason did. Julian Carr. They met 5 years ago at a conference on education and technology. Emily had been invited to speak on integrating digital literacy into elementary classrooms. Julian had been one of the keynote sponsors. Back then, he was still semi-anonymous, a name in tech headlines, but not yet a public figure. They spoke briefly. He asked thoughtful questions. She gave sincere answers. There was no flirting and no sparks, just mutual respect. Afterward, he sent her an email thanking her for her insights and asking if she'd be open to collaborating on a school pilot program. She agreed. Over the next 2 years, they occasionally worked together on community education projects. He funded a school computer lab she helped design. She offered feedback on his nonprofit initiatives. It was always professional, but it was real. After Emily got married, their communication slowed, but it never stopped completely. And when Julian heard through a mutual acquaintance that she was expecting, he sent flowers. When he found out Mason had been unfaithful, he showed up. He didn't come with an agenda. He didn't try to swoop in or make grand gestures. He just listened. Asked if she was okay. Brought her meals when she was too tired to cook. Made her laugh when her world felt unbearably heavy. One evening, when Emily felt like breaking, he said something that stuck with her. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Least of all someone who failed to see it in the first place. And for the first time in months, she believed it. So when Mason posted that photo with his mistress, thinking he'd humiliate her, Emily didn't fall apart. She remembered who she was. A woman who earned her own way. A woman with a voice. A woman who had spent her whole life giving others power over her emotions, her identity, her narrative, and who in one breath decided, no more. That's why she posted her own photo. Not for revenge, not for clout, but to take her power back, to tell the world, I see myself now, and I choose me. The Fairmont Regency Grand was the kind of place where even the carpets had their own Wikipedia pages. Tucked into the heart of downtown Los Angeles, the hotel was a towering symbol of wealth, tradition, and perfectly calculated extravagance. Its ballroom had hosted presidents, royals, and tech giants. The chandeliers were handcrafted in Italy. The walls were lined with original oil paintings guarded behind glass. And on the night of the Rosebridge Foundation's annual gala, a charity event disguised as a networking power play, it became the epicenter of one of the most viral betrayals the internet had ever seen. This wasn't just any gala, it was the gala. An invitation-only event so exclusive even billionaires waited on the list. The guest list included senators, CEOs, Oscar winners, venture capitalists, and anyone who could drop 6 figures on a silent auction item without blinking. Paparazzi camped outside for hours, hoping to catch glimpses of designer gowns and scandalous whispers. Inside, the scent of white gardenias floated through the air, imported and arranged by a florist flown in from Paris just for the night. Mason Reid had always dreamed of attending the Rosebridge Gala. To him, this night was about status, proof that he'd made it. He wore a midnight black Tom Ford tuxedo, tailored to perfection, his cufflinks glinting under the ballroom lights. On his arm was Marissa Blaine, a blonde marketing consultant turned influencer with 200,000 followers and a laugh that was louder than the string quartet. They looked like the perfect couple, or at least, that's what Mason told himself. He didn't even bother to think about Emily that night. Why would he? In his mind, she was still home, quiet, invisible, pregnant, weak. He had no idea that Emily had received her own invitation, and she wasn't coming alone. Across town, in a sleek penthouse with floor-to-ceiling views of the skyline, Emily sat in front of a mirror while her makeup artist dusted highlighter across her cheekbones. Her hair was swept up into a sleek chignon, a few soft tendrils framing her face. On her body was a custom satin gown the color of molten silver, crafted by a designer so exclusive their client list fit on a single index card. But it wasn't the dress that made her glow. It was something else. Calm, fire, power. Julian Carr stood across the room adjusting his tie. He wasn't flashy. His navy suit looked deceptively simple until you noticed the impeccable fit, the hand-stitched lapels, the rare watch on his wrist. He didn't say much as he walked over and offered his hand. "You ready?" he asked quietly. Emily met his eyes in the mirror. More than ever. They arrived at the gala in a custom Tesla Model X, one of only 5 in the world with a mirrored finish. The valet looked momentarily stunned. The press looked confused, then frantic. Flashes popped the moment the doors opened. Who was she? Was that Julian Carr? Why was he holding her hand? By the time they entered the ballroom, her name was already trending. Inside, the room was bathed in warm amber light. Hundreds of guests floated between tables like designer-clad swans, sipping champagne and murmuring stock tips. Waiters in crisp white jackets passed around silver trays of oysters and caviar. Emily walked beside Julian, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. People turned, they stared, and they whispered, "That's Emily Reid. Isn't that Mason's wife? Wait, no. Ex-wife? No way, she's with Julian Carr?" The whispers weren't cruel, they were reverent, shocked, awestruck. Emily wasn't the background wife anymore. She was the woman no one saw coming, the one who walked into a lion's den and made the lions blink first. Mason saw her before she saw him. He froze mid-sentence, champagne glass halfway to his lips. Marissa was still babbling about crypto coins or TikTok strategies. He wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on her. Emily, his pregnant wife, in satin and diamonds. With Julian Carr at her side, time slowed. She turned, their eyes met, and in that split second, Mason's heart sank. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't look angry or hurt. She didn't cry or scream or demand an explanation. No, she smiled. That calm, devastating smile that said, "I won." Mason turned to Marissa, suddenly painfully aware of how loud her laugh was, how fake, how cheap her gold-plated earrings looked next to the diamonds glinting on Emily's wrist. He felt a cold sweat break across his back. Emily walked past him like he didn't exist. She and Julian made their way toward the charity auction area, stopping to greet board members and major donors. Emily's voice was steady, her charm effortless. She didn't play the victim, she played the room, and she played it perfectly. Later in the evening, the foundation president took the stage to thank attendees. Cameras panned across the crowd, and when they landed on Emily and Julian, a murmur rippled through the room. Even on the giant screen, her expression was composed, elegant. And then it happened. During the donor spotlight reel, the foundation shared a surprise announcement. Julian Carr had made a $2 million donation to fund education grants in underserved communities, under Emily's name. The crowd gasped. Mason nearly dropped his glass. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a message. Emily wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, reclaiming her story, rebuilding her name. She wasn't a scorned wife in hiding. She was a rising force, backed by a man who valued her and who wasn't afraid to show it. As the night wore on, the ballroom continued to buzz. Mason watched from the shadows, eyes dark, fists clenched. Every laugh from Emily, every glance from Julian, it burned. He couldn't believe it. The woman he discarded was now the most talked-about guest in the room, and all he had left was a deleted Instagram post, a shallow influencer on his arm, and a growing fear that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Because in the war of image versus reality, Emily had flipped the script. She didn't need to scream. She just needed to arrive. If you asked Mason Reid to describe himself, he'd say he was a visionary, a disruptor, a man ahead of his time. But the truth? He was a narcissist with a Wi-Fi password. The problem wasn't that Mason failed to love Emily. It was that he never truly saw her. Not as a partner, not as an equal, and certainly not as someone whose light outshone his own. In Mason's world, love was just another currency, measured in usefulness, attention, and how well it fed his ego. From the outside, he looked like a success story. Raised in a middle-class neighborhood, he was the first in his family to earn a college degree. He studied business at a state university, graduating with average grades but above-average charm. His real talent wasn't innovation. It was convincing people he was the next big thing. Mason rode the startup wave in his late 20s. He bounced from app ideas to side hustles, pitching himself as a serial entrepreneur long before he had anything to show for it. What he lacked in substance, he made up for in style. Sharp suits, big words, and an uncanny ability to talk for 10 minutes straight without saying anything at all. He met Emily at an education tech event and immediately locked onto her like a target. She was kind, driven, and well-connected in nonprofit circles. But more importantly, she didn't lead with ego. Mason mistook that for weakness, and he liked it. She was the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke, the kind who wouldn't challenge his authority in front of others. At least, that's what he thought. To Mason, marrying Emily was like acquiring a premium feature. Loyalty, warmth, respectability, all without the threat of competition. For the first 2 years, he played the part of the loving husband. He cooked fancy meals on Sundays, bought flowers when she was sick, said all the right things in public. But slowly, the mask slipped. The business ventures failed to launch. His credit card bills grew while his promises shrank. He'd talk about scaling up while secretly using Emily's savings to cover his networking dinners. When she asked questions, he got defensive, accused her of not believing in him. He loved to be admired, but only when the spotlight stayed on him. And then, as Emily's belly grew with new life, so did Mason's sense of suffocation. Pregnancy wasn't romantic. It wasn't convenient. It was loud, messy, emotional, and it didn't revolve around him. The woman who once hung on his every word now needed rest, space, and emotional support. She cried at insurance commercials. She forgot the name of his new business partner. Worst of all, she stopped caring if he stayed out late, and that's when Marissa Blaine appeared. Marissa wasn't an accident. She was a calculated shift in Mason's narrative. 26, loud, blonde, and surgically sculpted to fit an influencer mold, Marissa was everything Emily wasn't. And Mason loved that. She didn't ask about his taxes or remind him about prenatal appointments. She cared about hashtags, follower counts, and making him feel like the alpha male he pretended to be. They met at a networking brunch Mason wasn't even supposed to attend. She laughed at his jokes like they were scripture, touched his arm when he talked, told him he looked like a younger Jeff Bezos, but hot. That was all it took. Within 2 weeks, they were sleeping together. Within 2 months, she'd moved into his downtown condo temporarily. And by the 3rd month, she was the star of his social media. He called her his muse, his marketing consultant. In reality, she couldn't consult her way out of a parking ticket. Mason convinced himself it was love. He said Emily and he had grown apart, that the spark had died, that pregnancy changed her. But deep down, Mason knew the truth. Emily hadn't changed. She just stopped shrinking herself to make him feel bigger. That's what scared him. When Mason posted the infamous photo, him and Marissa on a boat in Malibu, he wasn't just flaunting a new relationship. He was rebranding, rewriting the story before Emily could tell her side. He wanted the world to see him as bold, brave, honest about his truth. What he didn't expect was the clapback. Emily's engagement post detonated everything. The hand, the ring, the billionaire. He was blindsided. First came the silence, texts left unread. Emily's number blocked him. Then came the panic. His social media DMs flooded with hate. Followers dropped by the thousands. Brands he had just started talks with suddenly weren't moving forward at this time. Marissa told him to ignore it. It's just drama, she said. It'll pass. But it didn't. Because the internet wasn't just reacting to a scandal. It was choosing sides. And Emily had the receipts, the grace, and now the power. Mason tried damage control. He deleted the post. He called mutual friends. He even reached out to Julian Carr's PR team. Big mistake. The reply was brief, surgical, and cold. Mr. Carr declines to comment on personal matters. Please refrain from contacting us further. Mason's control was slipping. Then came the gala. He thought he could recover, show face, look unbothered. But the moment Emily entered that ballroom on Julian's arm, everything shattered. The looks, the whispers, the cameras. Mason felt naked. Marissa clung to him, confused by the attention suddenly not being about her. Why is everyone staring? She asked, voice sharp. Because that's my wife, he muttered through clenched teeth. Correction. Was. And as the night wore on, Mason realized something he never thought he'd admit. He didn't lose Emily because she changed. He lost her because she outgrew him. She grew into the kind of woman who couldn't be dimmed, who found strength in silence, power in grace, and dignity in walking away without looking back. He, on the other hand, had become exactly what the world accused him of being, a cautionary tale in a tuxedo. A man who chose clout over commitment, a man who burned down a home to chase the spotlight, and ended up alone in the dark. There are betrayals that happen in silence, quiet wounds that bleed behind closed doors. And then there are betrayals that explode in front of an audience, where every gasp, every whisper, and every stare becomes part of the scar. Emily Reid's betrayal was the second kind. But what Mason never understood, what he never even considered, was that the very platform he used to inflate his ego would become the same one that destroyed it. Because in 2025, cheating doesn't stay in the dark. It goes viral. The beginning of Mason's unraveling didn't start the night of the gala or even the day Emily posted her now legendary engaged billionaire photo. It started 12 minutes after his post went live. The one with him and Marissa on the boat in Malibu. Because 12 minutes was all it took for someone to screenshot, repost, and tag Emily. The comments came fast, and they came loud. Isn't his wife, pregnant? The audacity? This man just soft-launched his mistress while hard-launching his downfall. It went from a gossip thread to a trending topic within an hour. Influencers who had once fawned over Mason for his startup grind quickly deleted their collabs. TikTokers began creating side-by-side breakdowns of the timeline. YouTubers made hour-long exposés with titles like, "He cheated on his pregnant wife, then she got engaged to a billionaire?" It wasn't just juicy drama, it was digital bloodsport. And Emily, she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That single photo, her manicured hand resting gently on Julian Carr's, the massive emerald-cut diamond catching the sun, spoke louder than any press statement ever could. No caption needed, no hashtags, just a quiet, controlled burn of dignity and poetic justice. The next day, Emily was everywhere. Fashion blogs dissected her outfit from the gala. Business Insider ran a profile titled, "Who is Emily Reid, the woman who just silenced Silicon Valley's loudest man?" People magazine posted a poll, Team Emily or Team Mason. The final count, 94%, Team Emily. Even brand pages chimed in. A luxury jewelry brand reposted her engagement pic, a diamond as bold as the woman who wears it. Meanwhile, Mason's Instagram was a ghost town. He tried to post a vague quote, "Sometimes storms come to clear the path," but deleted it within 10 minutes after the comments ripped him apart. Publicly, he stayed silent. Privately, he was spiraling. His phone buzzed non-stop, not with congratulations or praise, but with texts from investors pulling out, friends distancing themselves, and an agent who told him, bluntly, "You've become bad PR." At the center of it all was a single truth Mason couldn't run from. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about betrayal, arrogance, and underestimating the woman he thought would always stay silent. Because Emily didn't fight him, she didn't beg, she simply moved forward. With power. 2 days after the gala, Emily was spotted arriving at CarTech HQ with Julian. The paparazzi photos showed her smiling, holding her belly protectively with one hand and Julian's hand with the other. A quiet image, but one that said everything. And as if that wasn't enough, the next headline dropped. Julian Carr appoints Emily Reid as Director of Global Philanthropy for Carr Foundation. It was official. Emily wasn't just the ex-wife of a failed entrepreneur. She was now a public figure in her own right, a future mother, a rising executive, and possibly, according to every major blog, the new face of Grace under fire. Meanwhile, Mason tried to do damage control behind closed doors. He sent flowers, called her sister, emailed her 3-page apologies. None were acknowledged. The world watched as his image cracked. But perhaps the most humiliating moment came not on a stage or in the press, but in a grocery store aisle. A fan caught him at Whole Foods, alone, wearing sunglasses indoors, staring blankly at baby formula. The video, captioned, "When your ex-wife is engaged to a billionaire and you're buying off-brand diapers," hit 12 million views in 3 days. The comments were ruthless. "Sir, please put the formula down and pick up some humility. Didn't cheat respectfully, didn't even win the rebound war." Emily really said, "Lose a husband, gain a legacy." Back at CarTech, Emily's first week was a whirlwind. She toured schools, met with donors, and helped launch an initiative to build libraries in underserved communities. Every step was intentional. Every move reflected more than image. It reflected purpose. And while tabloids obsessed over her outfits and baby bump, Emily remained grounded. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming her narrative, about making her child proud, about rising, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. She knew the whispers were still out there, that people still wondered, was she really happy? Was it all for show? The answer came a week later during a televised interview with Julian for a business documentary. The host asked him, "What's the most valuable investment you've ever made?" Without hesitation, Julian replied, believing in a woman who didn't know how powerful she really was, and then watching her become everything the world tried to convince her she couldn't be. Emily, seated next to him, smiled, and the internet melted all over again. Mason watched the interview alone in his apartment, the walls around him echoing with silence. No texts, no calls, no cameras. Just him, his regret, and the echo of applause that would never be for him again. Before she became the woman in the silver gown, the trending name, the fiancée of a billionaire, Emily Reid was just a woman sitting alone on a bathroom floor, holding her belly, trying not to fall apart. The truth about falling is that it doesn't always come with screaming or theatrics. Sometimes it's quiet. It happens in slow, invisible pieces. When you're smiling through pain, brushing your hair in the morning like everything's okay, and answering texts with "I'm fine" when your soul is breaking. For Emily, that moment came 3 weeks before the post. 3 weeks before the gala. 3 weeks before the world watched her rise. It started with silence. Mason had been gone all day. He left early, kissed her on the forehead like he used to, and said he'd be home late, big client dinner. Emily smiled and nodded, even though she knew better. She could feel the lie in his tone, could see it in the way he didn't look her in the eye, could smell the scent of another woman's perfume in his car every time she ran errands. But she said nothing, because that's what she'd been doing for months, staying quiet, telling herself she had to stay strong for the baby, that once Mason got over this phase, things would go back to how they were. That night, dinner went cold on the table. The chicken turned dry, the salad wilted, the candles burned down to stubs, and the house echoed with silence. By midnight, she had changed into pajamas and sat curled up on the couch, phone clutched in her hand, not dialing, just holding it, as if he'd sense her pain and come back, as if he cared. He didn't. He didn't come home until 2:38 a.m., and when he did, he reeked of tequila and arrogance. His shirt was unbuttoned, his hair tousled like someone had run their fingers through it. He didn't greet her, didn't explain, just stumbled to the bedroom and collapsed on the bed without a word. Emily sat in the hallway, the moonlight slipping through the window, her hands trembling. She felt invisible. And that's when she broke. Not with yelling, not with accusations, but with tears. Not the loud kind, the kind that fall silently one after the other, warm and slow, the kind you can't control. She wrapped her arms around her belly, the child that didn't ask for any of this, and whispered, "I'm so sorry." It was the first time she admitted it, to herself, to her baby, that she wasn't okay. Over the next week, Emily drifted. She went to her doctor's appointment alone. She smiled at neighbors she didn't recognize anymore. She stared at the crib in the spare room, wondering if love was ever real or just something we're taught to believe in. Her body was heavy, her heart even heavier. People say pregnancy is beautiful. They talk about glowing skin and joyful kicks. But no one talks about the loneliness. No one talks about crying in Target because the baby clothes remind you that you might raise this child alone. She tried journaling, praying, screaming into pillows. Nothing helped. Until she opened the iPad. She wasn't even snooping. She was looking for a recipe, something easy to make, something that might fill the ache with garlic and butter. But when she tapped the screen, his Instagram was already open, and the DMs were right there. She didn't mean to click, but she did. And what she saw gutted her. Photos, messages, "Can't wait to see you again, babe." Selfies in hotels, flirty voice notes, even screenshots of her own texts, mocked, laughed at, shared with the other woman like she was some annoying burden. She sat frozen, her hand on her stomach, the pain sharp, cold, unforgiving. That's when the rage hit. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was quiet clarity. She stood up, packed a small overnight bag, left a note that said only, "I need time," and she left. Where did she go? Nowhere glamorous, not at first. She drove to her sister's house 30 miles away, knocked on the door in tears, and for the first time in months, she let someone see her fall apart. They talked for hours. Emily sobbed into a throw pillow. She confessed everything, how she'd known for months, how she felt like a shell, how she didn't know who she was anymore without Mason's shadow, how she was terrified of giving birth alone, how she hated herself for staying, for hoping. Her sister, a no-nonsense nurse named Rachel, didn't say "I told you so." She just held her. And when Emily finally fell asleep, Rachel called someone. That someone? Julian Carr. Julian didn't come to play savior. He didn't bring flowers or speeches. He came with takeout, her favorite soup, and a quiet presence. He didn't say, "You're strong," or "You'll be fine." He said, "You don't have to do this alone." And for the first time, Emily believed him. Not just because of his status or money, but because when she spoke, he listened. When she cried, he stayed. When she said nothing, he didn't fill the silence. He sat in it with her. Over the next few days, she began to reclaim herself in small ways. She took a walk. She wrote in her journal again. She signed up for a prenatal yoga class. She made a playlist called Survive Then Thrive. She also blocked Mason. On everything. No calls, no texts, no explanations, just silence. Her choice. Her power. The day before the gala, Emily sat with her sister on the patio, the sun warming her skin, her baby kicking softly. Rachel said, "You don't owe the world a performance." And Emily replied, "I'm not performing, I'm arriving." That night, she chose the silver dress, not to impress, but to honor the girl who once stayed quiet, the woman who would never again. Everyone thought they knew Emily Reid. They saw the sweet smile, the gentle eyes, the polite nods in rooms where she was always introduced as Mason's wife. They saw her packing lunches, organizing school fundraisers, and nodding supportively while Mason rambled about startups and IPOs. To the outside world, she was the accessory, a lovely but replaceable part of his story. What no one realized was that his entire story was built on her. And when she left, the cracks started to show. But before the internet exploded, before Julian Carr made headlines beside her, before the engaged to a billionaire post shattered records, Emily had already made moves. Quietly, strategically, intentionally. Because Emily wasn't just surviving Mason's betrayal. She was preparing her exit. And her evolution. It started 6 months earlier, back when Mason first started acting off, before the Mistress, before the missed birthdays and late-night meetings that didn't exist. Emily noticed. She didn't confront him immediately. She observed. She watched the way he flinched when she picked up his phone, how he panicked when she brought up finances. She saw the lies forming before they even left his mouth. So she did what smart women do. She got curious. Emily quietly began copying financial statements. She checked credit card charges, took screenshots of large transfers, created a secure folder only she could access. She didn't fully know what she was looking for. But something felt wrong. What she found was worse than infidelity. It was fraud. Mason wasn't just cheating on her emotionally. He was siphoning money from their joint accounts, using Emily's name to secure loans, registering shell companies with forged paperwork that included her signature, digitally stolen from old contracts she'd once helped him draft. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a crime. But Emily didn't go to the police. Not yet. She went to someone smarter. Her college friend, Layla, now a corporate attorney with a reputation for being ruthless in heels, met her for lunch. Emily showed her everything. Layla's face went stone cold. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Em. This is jail time. He's not just an asshole, he's a liability." Emily's hands trembled as she sipped her tea. "What do I do?" Layla leaned in. "You protect yourself. And then, you make sure you get out before the fire spreads." From that point on, Emily stopped reacting and started calculating. She opened her own bank account in secret, transferred her paycheck to it, changed the passwords on everything tied to her name. She called the mortgage company and removed herself from the liability. She created a paper trail of evidence. And most importantly, she stopped trusting Mason with anything that mattered. To him, she still looked like the sweet wife. Pregnant, naive, clueless. But behind that calm smile was a woman preparing to burn the whole system down. Legally, quietly, and without a single tear wasted. And then came Julian Carr. Contrary to internet fan fiction, their romance didn't start with a grand confession or sudden kiss. It started with a message. "Hey, I know this is out of the blue, but I heard you're expecting. Congratulations. If you ever need anything, just someone to talk to, don't hesitate." Simple, respectful, unexpected. Emily hesitated at first. She hadn't spoken to Julian in over a year. But something about the way he reached out, not as a billionaire, not as a savior, but as a friend, opened a door. They started texting, then calling, then meeting, always in public, always platonic. He never pushed, he just showed up. He asked how she was sleeping, if she was eating enough, if the baby kicked yet. No one else asked her that, not even Mason. Julian didn't flirt, he supported. He saw her not as someone broken, but as someone building. One night, when she broke down over everything, Mason's lies, the fear of raising a child alone, the shame she felt for being fooled, Julian said something she'd never forget. "You don't need to become someone new to be powerful, Emily. You already are. You just need to stop hiding it." And that's when she realized she had the upper hand. Not because she had a powerful man at her side, but because she was the one holding the truth. She had all the receipts. She had the trust of people who mattered. She had nothing to lose. So she made a decision. If Mason wanted to play games in public, she would dismantle him in silence, brick by brick. She started by filing legal paperwork through Layla's firm. Not divorce, not yet, but asset protection. Then she pulled her name from all pending ventures under Mason's LLCs. She sent quiet warnings to banks and investors, subtly making them aware of irregularities in documentation. She even submitted an anonymous tip to the SEC regarding questionable startup funds, just enough to spark an audit. Meanwhile, she smiled, took maternity yoga, drank green smoothies, read parenting books, posted the occasional quote on Instagram, things like, "Sometimes your silence speaks louder than their lies." No one knew what was coming. And then, the final twist. She agreed to attend the Rosebridge Gala with Julian, not for attention, but for clarity, to close a chapter, to appear not as the betrayed wife, but as a woman reborn. What the public saw was glamour, style, headlines. What really happened was this. While Mason boasted to investors about new tech and scalable platforms, Emily quietly voided his ability to use her credit. While Marissa flaunted yacht selfies, Emily filed evidence with her attorney that would soon void Mason's right to joint custody based on financial fraud and unstable housing. While Mason chased fake validation online, Emily secured her child's future. And when she posted that photo, ring hand Julian, it wasn't just about love. It was about liberation. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need revenge. She needed proof, and she already had it. The twist was never Julian. The twist was never the diamond. The twist was this. Emily Reid was never just the wife. She was the keystone in a collapsing empire. And when she walked away, the whole thing crumbled. There's a moment, after the chaos, after the tears, after the silence, when something shifts. When you wake up and realize the worst has happened, and you're still here, still breathing, still standing. For Emily Reid, that moment came at 6:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was rising through gauzy curtains. The baby kicked gently. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Prenatal checkup, 10 a.m. But instead of rolling over, instead of hitting snooze, Emily sat up. She placed a hand on her belly, closed her eyes, and whispered, "It's time." The comeback wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about Julian Carr, or the ring, or the designer gowns, or the gala applause. It was about her. Rebuilding, from the inside out. The first step, therapy. Emily didn't walk in like a warrior. She walked in trembling, uncertain, still carrying invisible bruises from years of emotional erosion. But the therapist, a calm woman in her 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like safety, didn't judge. She just listened. For the first session, Emily cried more than she spoke. The second session, she started naming things. Gaslighting, codependency, betrayal, trauma. By the fourth session, she was writing goals. Not for Mason. Not even for the baby. For herself. Regain my voice. Learn to trust again. Stop apologizing for being enough. Then came the physical transformation. Not because she needed to glow up, but because she needed to feel strong. She hired a prenatal fitness coach. Joined a community of expectant moms who were more real than Instagram could ever be. She switched her diet, not to lose weight but to fuel herself, to nourish the life inside her and the one she was rediscovering. She cut off her hair. Just 2 inches, but it felt symbolic. She began wearing colors she used to avoid, bold reds, deep emeralds, confident black. Each change was small, but together, they became armor. And then, of course, there was work. Before Mason, Emily had a passion project, a nonprofit literacy program for elementary schools designed to bring diverse books to underfunded classrooms. It had started as a side hustle, then faded into the background as she supported Mason's endless startups. But now, it became her mission. She resurrected the program with a fire she didn't know she had. Rebranded it, relaunched it, met with schools, libraries, donors, Julian noticed. Without asking, he offered resources, a team, a budget. But not in a savior way, in a partner way. "You run it," he said. "I'll just clear the runway." With Cartech's backing, Emily's little idea exploded. Within 6 weeks, Read to Rise was in over 200 schools. Within 3 months, she was invited to speak at a national education summit. And in the middle of it all, she was still pregnant. Still healing. Still becoming. Social media took notice. But not because Emily was flaunting it. Because she wasn't. She didn't post every outfit, every gift, every brunch. She posted book recommendations, behind the scenes of classrooms, candid moments from her team. One photo, taken by a student, went viral unintentionally. Emily, crouched next to a little girl reading the name jar, both of them laughing, lost in the story. The caption? "Miss Emily said, I could be anything I want. I want to be like her." Tears. Everywhere. Even from people who had never met her. That was the moment the internet stopped calling her the ex-wife of the cheater and started calling her something else. A role model. Behind the scenes, the legal battle with Mason simmered. He tried to fight for shared custody, claimed to be remorseful, said he deserved a second chance. But Emily had documentation. Receipts, emails, transactions, patterns of neglect and manipulation. And a legal team that did not miss. When the court reviewed the case, the judgment was swift. Emily was granted sole custody, financial restitution, full rights to her assets, and a permanent restraining order protecting her and the child from further interference. She didn't celebrate with champagne. She celebrated with a long bath, a good book, a quiet night. Because peace was the new luxury. Her relationship with Julian grew slowly, respectfully. There was no pressure. They shared meals, walks, moments. He didn't try to fix her. He just stayed. One night, in the middle of watching a documentary on ocean conservation, his pick, Julian turned to her and said, "I don't love you because of your strength. I love you because you let me see the parts you were afraid to show." Emily didn't cry. She smiled, then reached for his hand. The baby came early. Not dangerously, just enough to surprise everyone. Julian was in the room. He didn't try to take over. He stood beside her, held her hand and whispered, "You've got this," over and over again. Emily gave birth to a daughter. They named her Grace, because that's what got her through it all. After the birth, Emily took a break, not from healing, she was still in that, but from the noise. She stepped back from interviews, appearances, even Instagram. She wrote instead, pages and pages, a memoir, not about Mason or Julian, but about finding herself. The woman who forgot her power, then remembered, then rebuilt. 6 months later, she returned to the public eye, not with a photo, with a TED Talk, titled "Quiet Doesn't Mean Weak, The Power of the Underrated Woman." It racked up 5 million views in 48 hours, not because of the delivery, because of the truth. Raw, honest, powerful, just like her. Revenge isn't always loud. It doesn't always come wrapped in fury, slammed doors, or screaming matches. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is delivered with poise, with grace, and with an audience that sees everything. Emily Reid never planned on revenge, not in the beginning. But life has a way of bringing people full circle and giving you the mic when it matters most. It was the Carr Foundation's annual Winter Gala. 6 months had passed since the infamous Rosebridge event, and everything had changed. Emily wasn't just a guest this time. She was the keynote speaker. The gala was hosted in a glass-walled venue overlooking downtown LA, strung with thousands of soft white lights, the skyline glowing behind the stage. The event was a celebration of the foundation's largest year yet, $50 million raised for global education initiatives. But tonight wasn't just about charity, it was about clarity. Julian had asked her weeks earlier, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Emily had nodded. "I need to. Not for the world, for me." She wasn't here to attack, she was here to arrive. As she stepped out of the car, the flashbulbs fired. She wore a custom white pantsuit with sharp lapels and soft silk beneath. No jewelry, no sparkle, just clean, confident lines. Her hair in a low bun, her eyes steady. She wasn't hiding behind glamour, she was commanding it. Julian stepped out behind her, Grace in his arms, now a healthy, giggling 6-month-old with a flower clip in her curls. The photographers erupted. Within minutes, Emily Reid returns to the stage was trending. Mason was already inside. He wasn't invited, but he came as the date of a mid-level investor who had snagged a +1. He'd heard about Emily's speech. He said it didn't bother him. It did. Badly. He hadn't seen her since the custody ruling, hadn't held Grace, hadn't spoken to Emily except through lawyers. His business had flatlined, investors ghosted, his image unrecoverable. And now she was headlining a gala he wasn't even supposed to attend. As Emily entered the ballroom, conversations paused. People turned, applauded, some even stood. She didn't flinch. She walked the room with calm authority. She was no longer the wife of Mason Reid. She was Emily Reid, educator, founder, philanthropist, mother. The program moved quickly. Dinner, awards, performances. Then it was her turn. The MC introduced her with reverence. She reminds us that strength isn't always loud, and that rising doesn't always mean fighting. It means walking forward when the world expects you to fall. Applause. Emily took the stage. No teleprompter, no notes, just her voice. I used to believe my life would be small. That playing it safe, being quiet, and supporting someone else's dream was noble enough. I thought disappearing into someone else's shadow meant I was doing love right. And then, I lost everything I thought I was. But here's what loss teaches you. You're never really lost. You're just waiting to be found. And sometimes, you're the one who has to do the finding. She scanned the room. Didn't look for Mason. Didn't need to. Tonight isn't about the past. It's about what we choose when no one's watching. It's about showing our children that dignity doesn't mean silence, that strength doesn't mean revenge, it means rebirth. Applause. Standing ovation. Not for a victim, but for a victor. Back at the table, Julian stood holding Grace. The baby clapped too, mimicking the crowd. Mason sat near the back, stiff, red-faced, staring at the floor. Marissa was nowhere in sight. Rumor had it she'd moved on to a younger crypto-millionaire weeks ago. He wasn't just defeated. He was erased. No one asked him for selfies. No one leaned in. Even the donor who brought him looked embarrassed. Because now, everyone knew. He wasn't the story anymore. After the speech, Emily descended the stage and began moving through the room, laughing, greeting donors, reconnecting with peers. Then she saw him, Mason. He looked smaller than she remembered, not just physically, spiritually. A man crumbling under the weight of his own choices. He stood up, tried to speak. Emily, can we talk? She paused. There was a time when that voice could shake her, a time when she would have melted at that tone, searching for hope in a sentence. Not anymore. Her voice was calm. No. Just one word, simple, final. Then she smiled. Not cruelly, kindly, firmly. The way you smile at a lesson learned and walked away. That was the real revenge. Not humiliation, but irrelevance. Later that evening, as the gala closed, Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Grace asleep in her arms. Julian wrapped a coat over her shoulders. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I faced him. And? She smiled. It felt like closing a book I don't need to reread. He kissed her forehead. No audience, no cameras, just peace. The next morning, the press exploded. Headlines like Emily Reid, the woman who redefined Grace under fire. From betrayal to boardrooms, how one woman took her power back. But none of that mattered. Because for Emily, the best part of revenge wasn't that Mason saw her rise. It was that he no longer mattered at all. By now, everyone knew Emily Reid's name. Not because she screamed the loudest or exposed every detail, but because she did something far more powerful. She transformed publicly. Not from weakness to strength, but from silence to sovereignty. She took back her story. One breath, one boundary, one bold step at a time. But the end of her story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a blueprint. And her final message wasn't just for Mason. It was for every woman who's ever questioned her worth, dimmed her light, or stayed too long in a place that didn't value her. 3 weeks after the Carr Foundation Gala, Emily was invited to deliver the closing speech at the Global Women's Leadership Summit. It wasn't just a speaking gig, it was the speaking gig. The room was filled with CEOs, politicians, artists, mothers, survivors, thousands of women who had fought battles both public and private. Emily didn't arrive in diamonds or designer gowns. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair in soft waves, minimal makeup. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to connect. She stood before the crowd, a simple mic clipped to her collar. And then she told the truth. There was a time when I believed that love meant sacrifice, that the quieter I was, the more I could hold things together. I thought that if I just worked harder, smiled more, forgave faster, I could fix what was broken. But the truth is, some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to teach you who you are without them. The crowd fell silent. I was the wife who supported him, the friend who said yes, the woman who shrank herself so others could feel big. And when it all fell apart, when I was pregnant, heartbroken, and humiliated, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. But she saved me, because she refused to stay broken. She paused, looking around the sea of faces, many of them nodding, tearful, still, knowing. I didn't rise because I'm special. I rose because I decided to. And every woman in this room, every woman watching online, you can too. Not when it's convenient, not when someone finally chooses you, but right now, as you are. The audience broke into applause, but she wasn't done. Here's what I've learned. Silence isn't always strength. If you're quiet because you're afraid, that's not peace, that's control. Your voice matters. Use it. Love doesn't require you to disappear. If someone asks you to shrink so they can shine, that's not partnership. That's manipulation. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself entirely. You deserve to be whole, not just for your child, but for you. Healing is messy. It's ugly. You'll cry on the bathroom floor. You'll feel weak. But healing doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're still fighting. Forgiveness is freedom, but boundaries are survival. You can forgive someone without ever letting them close again. There is power in leaving, and sometimes your greatest comeback starts the moment you walk away. She looked directly into the camera. For the woman watching this, sitting in your car or in your office bathroom stall, wiping away tears in secret, you are not alone. And you are not weak. You are becoming. Every no you say is a door opening to something better. Every step you take away from the thing that's breaking you is a victory. You don't need a billionaire to save you. You just need to believe that your own damn story is worth telling. After the summit, the speech went viral. Clips were shared in therapy groups, women's shelters, HR offices, classrooms. A single quote from the talk exploded across Instagram and LinkedIn. She didn't get stronger when they hurt her. She got stronger when she stopped letting them. The press called it the TED Talk that shook the internet. But Emily wasn't concerned with going viral anymore. She was focused on legacy. Over the next year, Emily grew Reid to Rise into a global movement. The organization opened its 500th school partnership in Kenya. She launched a fellowship for single mothers studying education. She published her memoir, Quiet Doesn't Mean Weak. It topped bestseller lists for 18 weeks. She wasn't just the woman who clapped back at her cheating husband. She was a movement. And Mason, he tried to rebrand. Again. Started a podcast called Rebuild with Reid, only it flopped after 3 episodes. The world had moved on. No one wanted advice from a man whose greatest achievement was losing the best thing he ever had. As for Emily, she kept her circle small, her team tight, her daughter growing. Julian remained by her side, not as her brand, not as her redemption arc, but as a partner. They didn't rush the wedding. Because Emily knew now, she didn't need a white dress to feel whole. She was already complete. One night after putting Grace to bed, Emily sat on her patio, sipping tea, looking out at the quiet night. The stars were clear, the wind was gentle, and for the first time in years, she felt entirely at peace. She picked up her phone and typed out one final post. Simple, soft, unshakable. To every woman who thinks she can't, you already did. Now go live like it. She pressed post, set the phone down, and smiled. Not because the world was watching, but because she no longer needed it to. So the story has ended, dear friends. Are you still here with me until now? If you are, then I know. Something in this story touched your heart. Maybe it mirrored your pain. Maybe it reminded you of your strength. Either way, this wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. A reminder that healing isn't about fixing the past. It's about honoring who you've become because of it. As the great heterodox quote says, the scar does not tell you that you were wounded. It tells you that you healed. Let that stay with you. And if this story made you feel seen, even just a little, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to this channel, because stories like this aren't just for entertainment. They're for you. And your journey? It's far from over. Comment below. I reclaimed my worth. Let's begin your next chapter together.